The Republican victory here in 1980 was no aberration. It marked a turning point in New York politics, and we're going to prove that in 1984.
New York has not voted for a Republican in a presidential election since Ronald Reagan defeated Walter Mondale in 1984. Mondale only carried Minnesota and the District of Columbia back in that landslide defeat. Nevertheless, former President Trump is in the South Bronx, as we reported tonight, for a campaign rally. That is where we find our Robert Costa. Robert, is this an elaborate campaign head fake?
Major, this is a campaign event that's happening here in the South Bronx on a hot afternoon, early evening, because former President Trump has to be in this region. He has to be in this state next Tuesday for his criminal trial, which I've covered from the beginning. So this is a location of necessity. They might try to link it to former President Ronald Reagan and his effort to win New York State, but this is not the New York State of 1980 or 1984. It's a deeply blue state. That being said, there are pockets of conservatism and Trumpism in the New York area. If anyone watching has ever been to Staten Island, they have their own reporting on that. There are Trump voters in New York, and many of them have flocked here today. I see a real enthusiasm here, but this is in no way representative of either the city or the state.
Robert, one of the themes that has come up, and I know the Trump campaign talks about this with some frequency, is the criminal trial in New York and the other cases brought against former President Trump in some respects may speak to longstanding grievances within the African-American community, the Hispanic community, about unfair prosecution. And when the former president talks about it as aggressively and as regularly as he does, that might find some traction. What do you think about that?
As a reporter, I always try to observe what's happening around me. And there's a lot of grievance among those here today, but not a lot of people following the details of this particular trial or the looming federal trials on the horizon. There haven't been protesters outside of the court, pro-Trump or anti-Trump, in any real respect. There have been pockets of them here and there, maybe dozens on some respective days. But this is a group of voters nationwide, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents, who aren't paying close attention to Trump's legal challenges. But to your point, many people share Trump's grievances about the perceived legal and political establishment. I've encountered that here in New York and elsewhere around the country. And that's certainly a current that runs through the Trump campaign. Whether it actually leads to real gains in places like New York or Arizona or Florida, where the Trump campaign is putting an emphasis on winning over voters of color, remains to be seen.
And it is one, of course, the most interesting statistical divide in this campaign right now. President Biden, if the polls are correct, losing support, at least initially, among Hispanic and African-American voters, and some suggestion that former President Trump is gaining some ground there. So whether it's strategically important in New York State seems secondary to a larger message the former president's campaign is trying to send, that he is both receptive and might even have a message that resonates.
Opportunity for the world to see.
And you're seeing, Major, in the advertising wars, a battle over black voters. For example, the Biden campaign out today with an ad effectively calling Trump racist. They're saying the former president has been sued over racial issues as a businessman. They played the clip of him remarking about the Charlottesville white supremacist protests, and this is something that we're going to see again and again.
In the South Bronx for us tonight, Robert Costa, as always, thank you very much. Later this hour, we will analyze new CBS News polling on how voters feel about the former president's New York criminal trial. You'll want to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I want to bring in our political panel, Deepa Shivaram and Olivia Beavers. Deepa is a White House correspondent for National Public Radio. Olivia is a congressional reporter for Politico. Robert gave us a very good intro. I want to play this advertisement put together by the Biden-Harris campaign. Robert summarized it, but I want you all to take it in yourselves, and then we'll get some reaction on the other side.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies.
Deepa, your sense of that ad and what it says about where the Biden-Harris campaign thinks they are and where they need to hope to move them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you hear that ad not focusing on like Biden saying, you know, this is what I'm going to do for black voters, right? It is
Or what I have done.
Or what I have done, exactly. Right. It is all about Trump. And I think you see that especially in Biden's recent rhetoric, in ads, in the way he speaks on the campaign trail. He wants the attention to be on Trump so people are reminded of what it was like to have Trump as president for 4 years, because there is some memory loss a little bit among a lot of voters, not really recalling or wanting to remember what exactly it was like under a Trump administration. But that, message might not resonate with some voters I talk to who sometimes when they're asked about President Biden, this is Black voters I speak with, Latino voters, especially in these swing states, they're kind of sitting there thinking, well, what has President Biden done for me? And they struggle to remember that as well. And so there are things that the Biden campaign is trying to point to. Student debt forgiveness is one of them, reforms on marijuana, for example. But there are not a lot of folks out there who right now are saying, and, I'm seeing that, and I'm putting President Biden's name next to those, what they see as accomplishments.
Olivia, I was on the campaign trail in 2016, and I remember in the aftermath, there was a sense that Hillary Clinton's campaign spent too much time talking about Donald Trump and not enough time talking about her agenda and what she would do. The constant effort to demonize then-candidate Trump, Republican nominee, someone new on the political stage, maybe might not have been the best effort. This seems like kind of a replaying of that. Donald Trump's really bad, and that's what you should remember.
I mean, there's certainly a risk, and I think that it comes as the Biden campaign has some frustration. They've been trying to sell that the economy is doing well. And even when the stocks are rising, Donald Trump is in trial for the hush money trial in court, and he's spending millions of dollars in ads. You're still not seeing a huge change in the polls in these key battleground states where he's, losing or within striking distance to Donald Trump. I think, though, some of this comes from concerns, and the numbers are quite staggering. Pew had numbers out where in 2020, Biden had 92% of the black vote and Trump had 8%. Right now, a couple weeks ago, they had a 57% point difference, with 77% going to Biden and 18% going for Trump. And that was a key coalition for him last cycle. So I think some of this is based off of concern. They're losing that coalition.
Deepa, something happened yesterday that might have fallen into the category of, well, it was eventually going to happen. We were just waiting for it. That is to say, Nikki Haley saying out loud, oh, all those things I said about former President Trump during the campaign, unhinged and not qualified, but I'm going to vote for him anyway. Right. Now the Biden-Harris campaign is saying, well, that may have happened, but we're still going to make a play for Haley voters.
That is right. And I was kind of waiting to see what exactly the Biden side of the situation would look like, because we had seen him even before Nikki Haley came out with her most recent statement, kind of make that strong case to Haley supporters and say, I know that your candidate is no longer in this race, but you should come join our side, which is a really interesting get, because there are a lot of voters who I think are maybe out there who haven't made their decision yet. And a lot of folks we have to keep in mind who are maybe going to stay home and stay out. And that is the voters that I think they are trying to grab and enthuse. That includes Black and Latino voters, young voters for sure, but also some of these folks in the middle here who aren't quite sure where they shake out yet. And so that statement from Nikki Haley probably expected on some level, but to see where those voters go next is going to be really interesting.
Olivia, you spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers. It strikes me that Republicans, particularly those who are enthusiastic for former President Trump, speak as if it's almost inevitable that he's going to win this presidential campaign. Do Democrats speak as inevitably about a Biden re-election?
I think they do, but I think the difference is when you actually get them in, a more private setting, and you'll hear Republicans voice frustrations. Sometimes they think they're not going to win the House because they've gotten embroiled in their own internal drama. And Democrats will have concerns, too. They'll look at the polling they've seen from Biden and fear that there will be down-ballot repercussions. But I think if you talk to both of them, they all say, I think we have a chance. And there is this still optimism that they can pull out. But a lot of things, as factors, as we know, are up in the air. The one kind of big question mark is what we were just talking about. Who is Trump going to pick as his running mate? And when I was talking to Republicans on the Hill, they said he needs to figure out who can help him win. He's dismissed the idea of Nikki Haley, but a lot of people are still saying his name or someone who can attract the same amount of voters, same type of voters that she appealed to.
And Deepa, we say all the time that polls measure the moment.
Right.
They don't capture behavior, they capture attitude, but yet they're still significant, at least in the way strategists and politicians look at the present. And the present situation is Biden down, but Senate Democrats running ahead of him, and solidly so in some of these battleground states. What do you hear about that?
I mean, it's one of those things where like you talk to a lot of folks and they'll still say it's too early, it's too early, it's too early. We're dealing with two presidential candidates who are pretty wildly unpopular for a lot of reasons. This is not a normal election, which I feel like we keep saying every 4 years, but it is true. And so I think what you hear from a lot of folks, especially on the Biden side, is wait until the fall, wait until after the conventions. It's still too early. People are unhappy with the choices they have on the table. And so when you see other Democrats kind of in the mix, those numbers might be higher because simply their names are not Biden and Trump.
The new normal is abnormal. Deepa Shivaram and Olivia Beavers, thank you so very much.